Bershus the Rav, Bershus the Coventry Dayan, Bershus the whole community. So the question has been posed to myself, Yanki Weiss, and Yedidi Rosenbaum over the last few weeks. What prompted this? What brought on this initiative that we decided we should have something as a community together to have this discussion out loud? I think almost cynically, the answer is basically what Rameir Shapiro, when he founded Daf Yomi, he got up there and said, I want to be able to have a Yid from Paris, a Yid from Eretz Yisrael, a Yid from America, to be able to have the same conversation. So in today's day and age, unfortunately, the reality is, and I've had this conversation, and I'm sure many people here had this conversation, you can meet a Yid from Houston, Texas, Cleveland, Ohio, Los Angeles, Chicago, Far Rockaway, New York, anywhere, and the conversation is the financial burden and the financial crisis regarding what it costs to be a From Yid. Tuition, yontif, it's astronomical. And to think about it, so we could either sit around complaining and all get involved and commiserate together and say, oh, it's so expensive and life is just hard. Or we could do be something proactive about it. As we know, in 1 month from today will be the morning after Yom Kippur. And what happens on that quintessential day, the holiest of holiest days? What happens? By that pinnacle moment, as the Kohen Gadol, the most saintly of priests, what happens when he walks into Lefnai Lefnim? What does he come out and say? Doesn't he say, oh, Klal Yisrael, this year what should you do? Learn tons of Torah, learn tons of Chesed. Klal Yisrael, what does he say? He says, Yiratzon, it may be your will that Klal Yisrael should have Parnasa. That's what comes out of his lips. That's what he wants. Because why is it so imperative? Why is Parnasa? Why is this concept of getting finances? Why is it so integral in Yiddishkeit? If you think about the Mishnah, this is probably not the meaning, the simple form, but almost with a poetic license, we could say that it says, in Kemach, in Torah, which means Yiddishkeit is expensive. There are a lot of costs that are associated with being a From Yid. And if we don't have that aspect under control, you're not going to have Torah, you're not going to have life, you're not going to enjoy Yiddishkeit. It's going to be one big burden. As we end off this week, we have the Teichacha. Teichacha ends off with all these colors. What does it say? It's because Tachas asher lo yavadita Hashem lekecha b'simcha. When we did Yiddishkeit, we did it. We did it on rote. We did it because we had to do it. We lacked that pinnacle point of it wasn't done b'simcha. So obviously the idea is we could all sit and complain. Finances is finances, Klal Yisrael is Klal Yisrael. It's expensive to be a Jew. But if we all as a community could come together and come in with an initiative that we all could be in it together, all for one and one for all, and everybody according to their means. But it should be an open dialogue, and it should be something that we are proud of as a community. And Baruch Hashem, I think most people have said very, very proud out loud that they're proud that this community is not I need to keep up with the Joneses, that we're not the Joneses. We're not the community that you need to keep up with. But we want to be everyone to be together. Ish echad b'lev echad. When you take on something together, it's going to make it that much more simpler to get through that process and overcome it. And that is the initiative, that's the goal, that's the vision, that's the dream that we all should come into this year, the simcha, the finances, to be able to be done in a way that's responsible and healthy. And we all should feel comfortable with each other and comfortable with our families. And Yiddishkeit, tuition, yontif, simchas, it all should be enjoyable moments, not additional stress on our lives. We are fortunate today to have with us a speaker that he is a man with many hats. He is one of the foremost prominent poskim and rabbinic figures regarding fertility. He's also one of the most foremost prominent poskim regarding end-of-life questions, which means the beginning of life and end of life. He is the guy, the man, the phone number to call for all of these critical questions. But what made him most famous, what he actually brought to Klal Yisrael with a Yitakar B'Shofar Gadol out loud last year, was this call of living life, of living Judaism, of living Yiddishkeit, the financial aspect of Yiddishkeit, what it means, how we can get a hold of ourselves, how we can get a hold of this aspect of Yiddishkeit. It is a great zchus for our community to introduce Rabbi Eliezer Gewirtzman, the Coventry Dayan, to say a few words in honor of this event.
I could just ask the MC. I was asked to speak for about 45 minutes, and he introduced me with just saying a few words. I want to know what many words is. Rishus, the Rav Shlita, Rav Daniel, who's a close friend of mine for many years. I got to see him before he was a Rav. I can't say before he was on the Mizrach, but before he was a Rav. He always needed his corner in the front to daven. But Mikse Shvache B'fanav, if I could just share with the Olam one line that I think would describe Reb Daniel. There are many people that we say about them, do as I say, not as I do. You have a Rav that more than doing what he says, you should do what he does. And I think that is a way to describe him as a Rav and as a Manik. I would also like to thank numerous people that put in the time to put together this morning of Chizuk, as well as LSJ, who we will speak about, who behind the scenes were involved in putting this together. I would like to discuss a topic today in regards to monetary spending, but being that I am a simple Yid, I don't want to discuss anything that has to do with Ruchnius. We have in Klal Yisrael, Goyse Yidden, of Avraham Elazban Zatzal, who lived his life for Olam Haba. He had the ability to be able to discuss this topic in regards to Olam Haba. Most of us, halavai, we should think of Olam Haba once in a while. If we want to have effective change, before we get to Olam Haba, we need to discuss our relations with finances as it relates to Olam Haza. And today, I want to focus specifically on that point. How does our financial habits affect our lives? We just had, in this past week's Parsha, the mitzvah of Yibum and Chalitza. The Medrash tells us that why is it that when a man dies without children and his brother refuses to marry his widow, that the process that is done is that the woman takes off his shoe. And the Zohar explains, it's a little bit above our pay grade, as we would say, that the shoes represents a person, his body in this world. And as long as a person dies without children, there's a connection that he still has with this world. And the woman comes and removes the shoe that sort of removes the connection from this world, and then the neshama could go on its way to the Olam HaEmes. But Rav Chaim Volozhiner explains that, in essence, when we look at this world, Rav Chaim Volozhiner explains that our neshamas actually have a connection to the Kisei HaKavod. Every Yid's neshama is actively connected to the worlds, to the higher worlds, to the Elamis Elyonim, and we're connected to the Kisei HaKavod. And every action we do has that connection. And he says, therefore, the guf, the gashmius, is the shoe, is just the bottom. But the clothing, the body, that represents the neshama, which is much higher and much greater. And based on this, they explain the Gemara. The Gemara says in two places, in Tzaita and in Ksubis, that they laugh at people who walk around in shoes and no clothing. Explains the Mefarshim, what does that mean? They're busy with their shoes. They're busy with their worldly possessions. Their shoes are shining, but there's nothing else there. The rest of their body is unclothed. Why? Because they're not concerned at all with their ruchnis. But the truth is, when we really think about the mashal to shoes, there's a fascinating thing about shoes. And that is, every other garment doesn't have to fit exactly right. Person loses 10 pounds, so a shirt is a little bit loose, he can still wear it. Shoes have to be exact. And it's a lesson to us. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us exactly what we need to be able to walk around and to serve Him. Not too big, not too small, not too wide, not too skinny. It's like shoes. It has to be exactly right. And our worldly possessions, our matana that we get from HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the form of parnasa, says of Chaim Volozhiner, that's like shoes. We get what we need. And that is one of the first things that we always have to accept when we look at our gashmias and our worldly possessions, to understand that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives me what I need. If my shoes were too big, I would trip. If my shoes were too small, I wouldn't be able to walk. The Mesilas Yesharim tells us that the biggest tool that the Yetzer Hara uses in this world is to get us not to think. We're constantly on the move. We're constantly busy. We're busy in the morning, we're busy in the afternoon, and we're busy at night. And what that accomplishes is that we never have an opportunity to have a perspective and to think, what am I doing? How is it helping me? Where am I trying to go? And am I succeeding in my ultimate goal? And if the Yetzer Hara is able to accomplish this, the person is set in his hands. Unfortunately, here in America, over 100 years ago, there was an article written about the new technologies that are coming out and how people will be able to do their jobs in so much less time. And what are people going to do with their extra time? Hazat Sarachin that they had 100 years ago. We know the answer. It disappeared. We don't have time for anything. And one of the biggest issues, as we will see, when it comes to dealing with our finances, the average person on the street never stops to think, why do I have money? Why do I have possessions? What am I trying to accomplish? And am I reaching those goals? And perhaps today, it's 2 weeks before Rosh Hashanah, we're in a time of personal perspective. We can stop and think these questions. What is the relationship between my money, my finances, my luxuries, and my expenditures in relation to my goals in life? What are my goals in life? What are my goals? And what are my goals for my children? And how does my relationship with Gashmias help those goals? And that's what we will try to accomplish today. I think if we stop and think, there are 3 reasons why we have an impulse to spend money on things we do or don't need. And I think we could divide it into 3 parts. Number 1, we want to be able to enjoy life. Many of us work hard. Many of us commute. Many of us put many hours a day into our jobs, and we want to be able, in some way, shape, or form, to simply enjoy life. Number one. Number two, as the MC mentioned, we need to keep up with the Joneses. And it's a very important thing. If somebody went and lived in a one-bedroom apartment with 7 children, his children probably will not come out the way he would like them to. So we have to keep up. Now the question is, what does that mean? But that's the driving force. And number 3, which we will discuss towards the end, those of you who have high school boys will know exactly what I'm talking about. There's a word in high school, you need to be chal. For those of you who don't have boys in high school, we need to be something. You want to call it a schwitzer? You want to call it, we need to feel important. We need to feel amongst ourselves, within ourselves, that I am an important person. And I'll say this publicly. It's very nice for a Rav to get up and say, my car, you go see my car. But you know something? As a Rav, the older my car is, the bigger of a Balgaiva I am. You think I need a car? You know who I am? I'm not a car, please, come on. But to many people, my car is a definition and a way for me to feel that I am important and that I made it in life. And that's something we can deny it. Every one of us has an inner wanting to be chal, to make it in life. Because otherwise, why would we even bother to wake up in the morning? It's so much easier just to sleep in. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created us that we want to be important, we want to be successful. And to many, and we will get back to this, living a certain standard is a way where we convince ourselves that we're now important. There's a famous Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. Ezehu Asher Hasameach B'Chalka. The older I get, the more of the world that I see, the more appreciation I have for this statement. Ezehu Asher, who is rich, Hasameach B'Chalka. When I was a boy and my father taught me Pirkei Avos, it was cute. Ezehu Gibor, no, it's not the muscle man, HaKovish is Yitzvah. Ezehu Asher, you think, Hasameach B'Chalka. But when you really stop and analyze it, you walk over to every young boy and you ask him, do you want to be rich? Yeah. Ask a boy in Brisk, do you want a rich shidduch? Yeah, no, shtei shulchanos, I need everything, right? Why? Why do you want to be rich? Why? Because then what? Because then I could have house mortgage free. Okay, now you have a house mortgage free. And then, eventually the answer is, and then I'll be happy. You ever heard of Donald Trump? He has everything he can want. And yet he allows himself to be thrown in jail, practically. Why? Because there's something missing. There's something not there. You could have golf courses, you could have villas, you could have homes in every state in the country, you could have hotels in every continent, and yet, if you're not happy, you have nothing. Our goal, our push to be rich is with an assumption that if we get there, we're going to be happy. But somebody who has the ability to be sameach b'chalka, to honestly be happy in the situation that he is much richer than the richest man. Because at the end of the day, he achieved the goal without the money. And when we really analyze what brings to happiness, we have to understand that there are two things in our lives. There are things that we need, and then there are extras. Things that we need don't make us happy. Extras, hopefully, could somehow make us happy. For example, it's not geschmack to eat breakfast in the morning. If we wouldn't have breakfast, and one day we would enjoy it. Breakfast doesn't give us any geschmack. We need it. Something we need is not there for enjoyment. Something that's a treat, something that's extra, that is supposed to at least bring to enjoyment. And the problem is, the more things that we stelle weg in our lives that we need it, the less things, the less happy we are. I'll give you an example. Imagine a meshulach. He comes from Eretz Yisrael. And put yourself in the shoes of a meshulach for one day. Comes from Eretz Yisrael. He knows of apartments in Mei She'arim, right? You've seen them all, right? With mice and this and that, 3 rooms, 700 meters, right, mamish? And he comes here. And he gets dropped off in the Mackenzie neighborhood in Tom's River. What do you think is going through his mind as he looks at the grass, the lawns, the homes, and the cars? Wow, I'm going to strike it rich right now, right? So he knocks on the doors and he starts figuring it out. But on a serious note, how does he look at the way we live? He's flabbergasted. How do we look at the way we live? Mitzvah Shem, in 2 years, when I have enough money, I'm going to make an addition. Right? That's what we're holding. Do we enjoy our homes any more than he does? The answer is no. Because to us, this is what's needed. I can't live any smaller, and could be we can't. And to him, you guys live villa, you can. You guys are living it up. What are you talking about? So in essence, we have this whole big, huge home, and to us, it's not extra. It's basic. It's the basic necessities of what we need. And the more we push up our basic necessities, the less we allow ourselves to be able to enjoy life. Someone many years ago once showed me a tshuvas of Moshe. I need to find it again. At the end of a tshuva somewhere, Moshe writes to someone, if you're going to take your children to Switzerland when they're 10 years old, where are they going to go on vacation when they're 50? And you know what Moshe is saying? There's such a musig of deciding at 50, I need to get away for a few days. And it's rejuvenating. It's beautiful. But if at 10 years old you were in Switzerland, what's 50? North Korea? I mean, where are you going to go? There's nothing left. It's boring. And this is something, when we stop and think about it, as we push up our hasagas, this is what's happening. When I was a boy, I davened to Meir Yeshiva. Without going into names, Meir Yeshiva, back in the 1980s and 90s, had some of Klal Yisrael's biggest gevirim davening there. When there was a kiddush, as a young boy, we couldn't wait for davening to be over to run next door to eat kiddush. We had cake, not only sponge cake. We had soda, maybe some herring, I don't remember, that I didn't touch. And that was about it. When a rich guy made a kiddush, he would serve kugel, and sometimes even chant. We came home so pumped. Don't worry, my mother, like the woman here, screamed, I didn't make a suda for nothing. It was the same conversations. But what? A bissel kugel and a bissel chant. 30 years later, kugel, chant, where's the meat board? Where's the this? You know what my kids need? To take their sprach, a worth it kiddush. You know what that means? To have something that's worthwhile. Chant and kugel doesn't do it. So you know what happened? We pushed up everything. For what? So now, if it's just chant and kugel, the mother's still upset and the child's upset. But if we could taka, have spirit, who knows what? Oh, now the olam's happy. So we accomplished nothing. We pushed something up and we made it that instead of being happy over here, till here is nothing, and now we're happy. And how do we get here? Contractor once told me, he says, if not for the line, once you're doing it, may as well, I'll be an oni ve'evin. Contractors, this one, that one, designers, unken cheshbon, and everything just gets pushed up and up and up. And what does that do for us? When I got married 20 years ago, we all had one car. That's what it was. It's one car. I lived in Coventry. There was a place where you waited to go to yeshiva. Whoever had the car that day would stop. As the oiler moved further out, there was a need that the oiler needed two cars. So there was a musig, it was called a local car. Bought a car for a few $100. Couldn't take it on the parkway, but it did what it needed to do. And that was already considered a luxury. Our houses 20 years ago, an average person, what was the square footage of a house for a younger man who got married 5 years, 7 years after his chasana, who went and bought a house? 2,000 square feet, 20, then it came 2,200, then it became 24, then 27, then 32. Now, I'm talking about basic houses. So we're up to now 4,000 square feet plus an unfinished attic, plus the basement. And what? Are we any happier? No, this is basic. This is what you need. I need this. The Yerushalmi in Meir Sharm needs that. So we pushed everything up, and we're right back to where we were, that our houses are crowded. That's basically where we are. And when we think about it, in every area of our lives, we pushed it up. That this is basic. This is what I need to live. Otherwise, I'm an ani. Think about it. Homes, cars, designer clothing. What about our hasagas and alcohol? Where did that go? Prices of restaurants, jewelry, exotic watches, vacations. These are basics. Family doesn't go on vacation at least, I don't know, once a year, twice, whatever. Midwinter, summer. We pushed it all up. You ever think about this fascinating thing? You take a chasana. Parents make a chasana. The mechatanim spend hours. They toil over everything. It's very important. The chas and kalin need to feel that they have whatever that means. Whatever they taka. You ever think about what a meal by our chasanas look like? Who eats the food by a meal? You have parents that can't afford a chasana. So they basically have to turn to their family to help them out. Okay, so who eats by the chasana? The few shvagas who basically paid $5,000 for their plate, and the few losers that didn't time the time they came to the chasana, right? The music stopped as they walked in, and they're like, oh shoot, so they eat supper again. Right? That's basically who eats by chasanas. And we spend so much time and so much effort And the prices keep going up and up and up. For what? For whom? We never stop to think about it. We analyze. No, we need this. Should we just have a regular entree? No, it has to be upgraded. Why? For who and for what? You want to add 2 dishes by the smorgasbord for people who come from New York who need to eat something. But every last nakuda, stop and think for a second. Who's eating it? Which garbage can? Sorry. Which garbage can? It doesn't make sense. But we're stuck. We're in it. And when we're in it, we don't hear it. The bottom line is, most of us, we sort of nicely came across this level without even stopping to think how we got here. We go along with the Joneses. There are a few businesses that make it their business to push certain things up higher. And we, as blind sheep, as people who don't think much, just go along. This is important, that's important. If everyone gets a new minivan, I need a new minivan. If everyone this, if everyone that. So we end up, we got here, thank you very much. We ended up getting here, not because we wanted to, but because we just landed here. If we stop and think about it, this is assuming that we can afford it. And this is assuming that we have the money for all this. But you know what we did, in short? We basically took our hard-earned money and ensured that we stop enjoying life. That's basically what we did. Because we spent and we spent and we spent until the point that it's no longer a luxury, it's a necessity. And if it's a necessity, I don't enjoy it. And if I don't enjoy it, I don't have it. So we took hard-earned money, we invested koiches and time at work and so on to ensure that we don't enjoy life. That's the best case scenario. But what about the fact that there are many people who can't keep up? And besides the fact that they're just not happy, they now have bills that they can't pay. They have to do it. Everyone's doing it. And unfortunately, there are many people who are now in that boat. And we have to ask ourselves a question. Even if I could afford this, A, am I happier now than my parents were 25 years ago? B, am I really convinced after I set a certain standard and lifestyle for my children that every one of my children will be able to keep up with this financially? And if the answer is no, comes $1 million question. Why am I doing something that is going to make my child miserable? Because when a child is raised with a certain standard, and then, dare I say, the woman's husband can't keep up with it, life is terrible after that. Did we ever stop and think along these lines? Did we ever stop and think if this is something that's creating happiness or not? It was mentioned in the introduction about Shofar Kol Gadol a year ago. I would like to take the olam behind the scenes a little bit. This drasha that I gave in the Coventry community that maybe some of you heard about. We put up a sign in shul around the neighborhood, on the chats, whatever. But there's an important message that we would like to share with the olam, Rabbi Mintz and myself, if people complete, that we're asking that the women should please make every effort to come. Why the women? It was spoken about in shul a number of times on Shabbos. One of the Mailas is speaking on Shabbos is that it's not recorded. And we felt that it was time for the women to hear a drasha. As this is the case, when the Rav speaks anywhere, there were plenty of empty seats. And we knew that if we wanted to get it out to the community, it had to be recorded. So, gave the drasha. I think maybe 50 women came, and we sent out the recording the next morning. Now, most of you listening to me for a half hour already have picked up on the fact that I'm no FDR, okay? I'm not Abe Lincoln, I'm not FDR. In fact, my speeches didn't even earn the right to get onto Torah anytime. So the question becomes, how in the world did a speech from an unpolished assistant rabbi end up, machlekes haposkim, exactly 50,000, 80,000 hits? How did that happen? And if you listen to the speech, there was nothing said on it. There was not one chiddush that was said. I was then asked to give a podcast for kosher money. Last time they told me there was 117,000 hits from all the different platforms and podcasts. I don't know, I'm sorry, I'm not so good with this stuff, but that's what they told me. Again, nothing said. Why is it that this is what happened? The answer is very, very simple. Because people are suffering in silence. People felt, as my emails blew up, told me, I thought I was the only one. And when I mentioned that if somebody is working for somebody else, he's not making more, maximum he's making is $150,000 to $200,000, I got criticized for it. You assume that when people work for someone else, they make that kind of money? This is the reality. And the question that every person has is, I know I'm not making it, but how is everybody else making it? And as one Gewirr told me, he says, you know the best part of your speech? I used to think my neighbor has money. Now I chap, he doesn't. He works for somebody. That was a good feeling. Shkayach. But on a serious note, it was ma'ira people. It was ma'ira people a simple thing. I'm not the only one. And if that's the case, so what's really going on here? I'm doing for me to do for Yanim, so Yanim can do for me. So... And then comes the question, we're in a mess. How do we get ourselves out of this mess? How did this... We're all sitting here, we're all asking the same questions. Can't say it out loud. You can't chas v'shalom come into shul and say, you know, I just had to buy all my kids' clothing, my credit card bill that I got, I have no idea how I'm going to pay for it. You can't say that. Why not? Why not? You think you're the only one in this shul that has this problem? It's pashut. But yet, we all try to make it that it's okay. So how do we get out of this mess? So I think the first thing we have to realize is as follows. Every person is entitled to mishigasim. We have to accept that as a fact. Rabbi Moshe writes in the tshuva, what do you do when you're 50 years old? We're all entitled to mishigasim. But what we have to understand is that not everybody's mishigasim is my luxury. Meaning, I could decide that I have this mishigas. It's my mishigas. I need a new car. Need a new car? No, I need a new car. Just because I need a new car, that's my mishigas. That's my luxury. Doesn't mean that all my neighbors now need a new car because I need a new car. My mishigas is, I like nice clothing. Said, it's a mishigas, we're entitled. But the more we can understand that we're entitled to certain luxuries, and that's what it is. And just because my next door neighbor has different mishigasim and different luxuries, doesn't mean that I have to follow suit. That's the beginning. Do you know there was a study that came out recently that 75% of people in America think that fast food is a luxury? I didn't say salts. I didn't say Sears. I said fast food. What percentage of people in Lakewood think it's a luxury? We just feel that we're entitled to it all. It's all, we need it. And as we said earlier, if that's what's needed, so there's no enjoyment. If I'm going out to eat, because if I want to stay married, I better take my wife out to eat 6 times a year, it's lousy. If I'm going out to eat because I would like to enjoy my spouse's company, and we did it because we wanted to, and there's something to it. Many years ago, there's a booklet called the Ura Auction. Some of you maybe heard of it. They have something called the Ura Auction. The side of the Ura Auction from day one was to think of like extravagant, wild things that fivers could come up with. And, you give $5, you have a chance of, winning the lottery. And, you can have a connection to extravagant things. So I want to tell you something. I'm sure wild thing that fivers came up with. Okay? You ready? You could have the summer in the mountains, Sukkot in Eretz Yisrael, winter in Florida, Pesach in a hotel, and Shavuos in Lakewood. Mamish the whole year. Everybody say, does that sound so extravagant? Baruch Hashem, we didn't catch on to it all. Shavuos in Lakewood never took off. Right? There used to be a zach that if our boss wanted to spend Shavuos in Lakewood, Matan Torah and BMG, Baruch Hashem, we didn't get there all. But everything else, do you like me feel that in the summer you have to explain to your kids why you're not in the mountains, and Sukkot you have to explain to your kids why you're not in Eretz Yisrael, and Florida in the winter, and Pesach in a hotel? Is this normal? This was for five-ish. Is this called enjoying a family vacation? And this is, and a child who doesn't have them all, never feels that he's poor. If his father's a Rebbe, he's not going to be a Rebbe. He needs to live life on the basic level. So the answer is, what we have to do is stop and to ask ourselves, what of our life is really needed, and what parts of our lives are maybe not so needed? And this is where our shutfis with LSJ comes into the picture. Because when we identify, when we stop and we ask ourselves an honest question, we have cars. Do our cars really have to be so updated? Maybe yes, maybe no. But you know what? It's a luxury. Let's accept it as fact. It's a luxury. We go to the mountains, we go here. It's a luxury. Again, we're entitled to luxuries. And now to sit down and to make a cheshbon in our lives as a couple, sit down with a counselor and to go through a cheshbon in our lives. Tuition is a necessity. A brand new car maybe is a luxury. Wine for Yom Tov, it's a luxury. It's a beautiful luxury. It's simple as Yom Tov. Get paid back, but it's a luxury. And go through and divide in English what is what we would refer to as discretionary spending. How much of our budget do we have no choice, and how much is what we would call discretionary spending? Going to Sears 6 times a year, it's very nice. It enhances Shalom Bayis. It's discretionary spending. Person does it, it's beautiful. He has a mishagas, he's entitled. But it's discretionary spending. I think we would be shocked if we took our budget and stopped and made a cheshbon of what of our budget is discretionary spending. I think when we realize that the number starts with a 3, 4, 5, I can tell you from Coventry when they did it. The Olam was shocked. Go on vacation. It's a discretionary spending. Got to do something, but it's discretionary. And when we start realizing that if we can cut that number in half, we can make chasanas by ourselves. We could support our children in kollel. We can do all the things that we already were miyayish from doing. How much does it talk to you? How much does that vacation in an exotic hotel really talk to you? Life is about priorities. We mentioned at the onset how difficult it is to be a frum yid. It costs money. You know what life is? With a spouse, a dog, and 1.2 children. It's a lot more miserable. Baruch Hashem, we have expenses. And those expenses lead us to simcha, lead us to enjoyment. But we have to understand that our luxuries, although some are necessary, is it all necessary? There were people who sat down, and we'll explain at the end how this works, and Kalish will explain it as well, who sat down with a counselor and came back to me and said, I'm living in Coventry. I spent between $40,000 and $50,000 in discretionary spending over the last 5 years. How am I supposed to feel when I realize that the reason why I'm locked out of the housing market has nothing to do with the amount of money I made, but rather with the amount of money I spent? And if I would have just been a little smarter and put away half of the money I wasted, I'd be living in a house now and I'd be able to afford my mortgage. How painful. And the truth is, when we stop and think about it, if we make a cheshbon, if we put into perspective the money I'm spending, the perceived enjoyment that I think I'm getting, and whether it could be well spent elsewhere, who knows? Some of you may know my brothers. My father was zeicha to have 3 sons in Lakewood, Paskining Shilas. People ask him, what schus did you have to have sons that are poskim? And he answered, I supported them in kollel for many years. That's his answer. It's a tremendous schus that we could have an opportunity to support our children. The nachas that we get when we support our children in kollel, we don't even have to learn, and we watch them vaksais. It's amazing. For many of us, it's a pipe dream. Is it really a pipe dream? Making chasanas, helping children after the chasanas, we think it's impossible. Let's sit down. Let's analyze our finances. And when we stop and we realize, again, not because we can't, not because our Rav said it's fair, but because is this really the smartest thing to do with my money to achieve happiness? When we do it from that perspective, it's a whole different world. We mentioned the second nakuda about fitting in. Fitting in to our neighbors, our cars. We can't be nerdy. As they say on the other side of the mechitza, I can't be a neb. We can't, it's true. But you know what? When you come down to a decision, not because you can't afford it, because you have higher priorities in life, you don't feel like a neb. When you feel that you can't afford something, you feel like a neb. When you make a decision that I'm making just as much money as them, but I would much rather make my own chasana than have the community collect for me. Or I would much rather support my children. Or I would much rather not have to take a medicine to open my credit card bill. Nebuch. The pressure depends where we're holding financially. I want to live within my means. I remember many years ago, there's a fellow, Rabbi Litke in Muncie, comes, he speaks to the BMG in Galayat every few years. He said, such a murder gewort. So it's maybe a little bit sharp and a little bit maybe out of our league, but I think we could appreciate it anyway. He says, you know, when you were growing up, there was this guy on your block that always used to make like the bar mitzvahs in his house and whatever. You always felt bad for him, right? Don't feel bad for him. You know why? Because he doesn't feel bad for himself. A person who's in control, a person who decides, who makes a cheshbon from strength as opposed to weakness, as to why and what I'm spending my money on. It's a different world. It's a different understanding. And all of a sudden, I don't feel the need to necessarily live up. And one of the biggest milas that your Rav and fellow community members did by calling this meeting is that here in the Mackenzie community, as a community, we can begin having the sprach. Yeah, I felt I needed this, it's taka mishagas. But you know what? The other thing I'm not going to do. Whatever. I have other things that I want to spend money on. Whether you have money in savings, whether you don't. This wasn't important to me. We could develop something new. And amongst ourselves, we could create a peer pressure. We could create what we would call a new normal, although till now maybe wasn't normal. That pshat is we talk about the fact that we have priorities in life. And the reason why I didn't renew the lease on my minivan was because I had other priorities. That's why. Nothing. I don't have to be embarrassed. I don't have to drive around with an expired new car sticker because so people should still think that the car is new. It's fine. It's beseder. I'm okay. You know why? Because I have other priorities. Not that I can't afford it. Maybe I could, maybe I can't. But this was not something that I felt the need and the necessity to spend money on. Let's talk about the last Nakuda. The idea of being chal, the idea of feeling important. And honestly, if we're not going to address it, if we're not going to be honest about it, we're fooling ourselves. We all have a need. As we said, you can't even call it a Yetzer Hara. It's what drives the bus. When we see people who who succeed more than us, it hurts, and we try to emulate them, whether it's in the Beis Medrash, whether it's at work, or whether it's in how we spend our money. And we have to acknowledge that it exists. You look at a 5-year-old, a 4-year-old kindergarten graduation. They ask every child what he wants to be when he gets older. So a few kids, they were trained to say, Talmud Chacham. It's only in Lakewood. It used to not be that way. The biggest vote you're always going to get is a fireman. Right? Everyone wants to be a fireman. Right? Why? It's cool. You have a big hat. You honk the horn. Everyone moves out of the way for you. You want to be a fireman. As you get older, our seichel allows us to understand that being a fireman is not so cool. And I'm sorry, I hope there's no firefighters here. I apologize. If there are, he's only doing it as a volunteer second job. But we start having other aspirations in where we're going, right? And one of the things that we have is that we need to be rich. And once we have that aspiration that that's what means being chal, we sort of convince ourselves that even if we can't be rich, but if we could at least have the stuff, so then we're chal in that way. People ask, why is this generation suffering with this so much? And previous generations did not. I don't know. But if there's one thing that I could share with you growing up in Flatbush, I grew up halfway between Meir Yeshiva and Chaim Berlin. There was a stolz in being an Erlich Balabas. A Balabas had pace. And you know what that did? Everyone always says, yeah, pace, who cares? And the color of your shirt, who? But you know what that did? That gave people a way to be chal. An Erlich Balabas was a maila. I once walked over to a parent in Coventry by a kiddush, and I told him, I was sitting in the Din Torah. The two sides did not agree on anything, except for the fact that your father, Olav Hashalom, was the most honest person that they met. The gleam on his face to that comment, Rabbi Isai, it doesn't mean anything to us anymore. It's not in our goals and it's not in aspirations. And you know what? If we accept the fact that every one of us has to be chal, and unfortunately, we let what the previous generation cherished, frumkeit, ehrlichkeit, being an erlich balabas slipped away. Is it a kasha that we look to items, money and stuff as a hechetimsa to fill that void? What we need to do is to understand. I want to tell you something. You see people going to hotels for Pesach. There are many people who go to enjoy themselves. But do you realize there are more people than we want to admit who go to a hotel for Pesach because that's the only way they can spend 8 days with their wife? It's the only way that they can sit down for a Seder because, you're in a hotel dining room, you get up, you schmooze, you come back. But if they would be locked up in their house and actually have to focus on their children for 6 hours straight, or even if they could do it in 2.5, they're incapable. So there's a simple solution. You go to a hotel. This is what you're jealous of? But the teretz is, we don't realize it. We don't cherish it. We should cherish the idea. We have children at home. I'm in my mid-40s. I just have now 3 children in Eretz Yisrael. That's it, it's over. Eretz Yisrael, marriage, Be'ez Hashem, it's done. There's so much I wish I could still schmooze with them, talk to them, have with them. Baruch Hashem, I have more children. How long does it last? Rabbi say, so many of us have an opportunity now to work locally in Lakewood, which didn't exist 10 years ago. Why don't we take advantage of it? Instead of showing up at work at 10 o'clock and staying till 6:30, start work at 9, end work at 5, be home at 5:30, eat supper with your kids. You won't have to ask your wife what your 3-year-old just said. You'll actually know. Sit and learn with every one of your kids, boys, girls, and then walk out. I'm chal. I'm a father. I'm an erlich yid. I'm a father. I have a chavusa every night. I'm not sitting in airports, delays. I don't care if you fly private. You're still not home. Fine, we have to chap things that are important. We have to develop a stolz for being a good father, for being an erlich yid. If we're chal, all of a sudden, I don't need stuff to be chal. I look at the guy as a nebuch. He has to hire a tutor to get his son into Mesivta And I did it all by myself because I have that relationship with my son. How many, we can ask ourselves a question. Cursed out, eating out. We ask ourselves an honest question. If you would take each one of your children out to eat for 45 minutes, would you have what to tell him or her? Honest question. Maybe yes, maybe no. We're missing in action. If we focused as a community, not just the hour a week, of a sabanim, check in, you come late, your kid goes to get his prize, his ticket, you come back, right? For real. Go finish Mishnayos with your son for the bar mitzvah. 3 Mishnahs a day from when your son is 9 years old. Spend a few extra minutes with him. You know what that feels like? When he gets up and makes a siyum on Shisha Sidrei Mishnah, and you learned the entire thing with him. There's a beautiful new art school, Mishnayos, in English and in Hebrew. It's right there on the shelf. You could teach him whatever you want. It's all there. We don't take the opportunities. And Memela, we're missing basic happiness in life. We have to be chal, and we go run to be chal in all other places. To summarize, our first step is a perspective. Stop and think. Why am I here? Forget Adam Haba. What do I want? Happiness in this world. What am I trying to accomplish? How am I trying to get the max out of this world? Number one. Is my spending in line with my goals or not in line with my goals? Is my spending creating happiness, or is my spending creating an addictive drug to things that I need now that I didn't need 5 or 10 years ago? Am I creating a situation for my children that Nebuch in 20, 30 years, they're going to be miserable because of something that I did, whether I realize it or not? And last, and then I'll just spend 2 minutes explaining the milo of sitting down with somebody. If I'm accepting the fact that some of this or all of this has to do with the fact that I need to be chal and to be important, what am I doing in my life to ensure that I feel accomplished? One thing is, if I have my finances under control, I feel accomplished. And the second thing is, the easiest place, Chazal say, a man is a king in his own home. What does that mean? We have to be a king, and a woman has to be a queen. But the place to do it is in our home. How much more can we get out of our home? Being chal, being a father, raising our children, being on top of the education of our children. The feeling is lo yauman. We have to put in the effort. And if we focus on it, that will allow us to feel fulfilled without the need of trying to fulfill it in so many other ways. Just to explain, and Rabbi Kalish will explain it, but just from a rabbinical perspective and what I saw. The idea behind sitting down with a coach is as follows. At the end of the day, most of us don't really understand what comes in, what goes out, how and why. The beginning of succeeding in tackling this nisayon, as Chazal say, is boyu cheshbon. Stop and make a cheshbon. It's done as a couple, husband and wife. For many husbands here, that might sound very daunting, but the bottom line is, you sit down with your wife and somebody, and you should go through. And again, the goal is not to knock out every dollar that doesn't have to be spent, but to sit down and to make a cheshbon and to divide your money into 2 parts: necessary spending and discretionary spending. Come up with a number. And then, once a person realizes what's going on and where those numbers are, you could then turn to starting to think, 1 second, if I'm spending $30,000 on discretionary spending, I can knock it down to 15, I'm 7, 8 years off from making chasanas, I can put $100,000 in the bank. And if I did that, then this. If I did this, then I could do that. That comes second. And most important, what we can do as a community, every person who sits down and every person who begins the talk of this, I didn't feel was necessary. That creates a tremendous sense of relieving the pressure for everybody. This I thought was, yeah, point, I decided, whatever. My mishigas, whatever. And especially the woman, not to sit around in circles and say, you have to do this. I'm telling you, you don't have to do anything. I won't. For me, it's very convenient. That's beautiful. You don't know who you're talking to. You don't know what kind of pain you're causing people sometimes. And to just change that sprach as a community, I thought for me it was worthwhile, so I did it. Yeah, whatever. Makes a world of a difference. Obviously, there's other services that LSJ has, really being able to help people really make a budget and so on. I'd rather, I have to be honest, I don't know that I could live sitting down with my wife every Motzei Shabbos and figuring out what we spent and what we didn't. For certain people, it would be very helpful. But at least, if for nothing else, the basic zach to sign up, to have a coach, that every person here should know where they're holding. Every person here should have a perspective of what we did. What am I doing till now? Is this in line with my goals in Olam Hazeh? Talk about Olam Haba a different time. Olam Hazeh. How can I make changes to better my Olam Hazeh? And Taka, we should be zeicha that each and every one of us should be able to help ourselves and our community, and we should be zeicha to be able to live ba'ava v'achva b'shalom v'reyus, on which each one of you, thank you very much for coming. And if I could just ask the Olam just a few more minutes for Rabbi Kalish. I think I want to drop overtime. I'm sorry. Thank you very much.
Hi. Good afternoon. Number one, I'm not a rabbi. I'm just a regular guy. Just going to give you a little bit of introduction of how it works with LSJ. Basically, there's a QR code in the back over there. You can just scan it and they'll send it in. They'll basically set up a meeting with you and your wife can sit down 15 minutes just to get a little bit of background where you guys are up to in life and try to figure out what coach would work for you. Tell you a little bit about what I do. I'm a regular guy. I have a regular job. I love this stuff. I've been doing this for 9 years, helping people. And really what we're trying to do is just to get a little bit of an idea of what's going on in your life. We're extremely busy, as we heard the Rav talking. We don't have any idea of what's going on in our life. We're just doing things because our neighbor do it. It just becomes normal. We need it, we need it, we need it. And just to change the language of saying need versus want is an extremely powerful thing. And what we're trying to do is just figure out what is important to you. Not as what everyone else is doing. Everyone has difference of importance. So we try to talk a little bit about banking, investing, putting away towards chasanas, putting away towards our future instead of just figuring out what's going on day to day. We work out budgeting, investing, and that's really what we're trying to do. Give everybody a little bit of clarity what's going on in your life, make decisions that's going to work for you. It's not about me. It's not about anybody else. It's about you and your wife sitting down and figuring out something that's going to work for you guys. That's it. Good luck.
We'd like to thank Rabbi Gewirtzman for coming down and Rabbi Kalish for coming down to speak. And of course the babysitters who were able to take care of it and all the sponsorships. Thank you very much. Everyone should have a tzivah, chsimatayv, and a good event. Beautiful. Thanks, man.